Now let's use an example. In Kenya, Kenya is a country in Africa that has rather high levels of starvation and hunger. And so it's a country where people die of starvation. But at the same time, it's a country in which they have plantations in massive amounts of land area full of coffee bean plantations. Why? Because there's suddenly a global demand for Kenyan coffee. Coffee or coffee beans that are from the country of Kenya. And so because it's globally demanded, it's become the resource curse in Kenya. So here you have a particular resource. In this case, coffee beans. This is something that's widely consumed in the global market. So people are willing to pay a high price for this coffee bean. But at the same time, these large fields of nothing but commercial agriculture in the form of coffee beans is essentially in places in which people are dying of starvation, of hunger. So what it is whoever has power, whoever has control, in this case whoever owns the plantation or who has control of a large amount of land area, thus has the power as far as controlling the coffee bean plantation, coffee bean industry, in having a monopoly of it in Kenya, but at the same time controlling the fact that instead of growing crops for the local community, this is being used for profit. And in general, that's the pattern we see. We see three primary coffee growing or coffee producing and exporting areas of the world. You've got Central and South America. We also have Africa, and then a little bit of Southeast Asia, there in particular Indonesia, where the city of Java is located, which obviously for coffee fans, they know all about that. And so that's kind of the production of coffee, but as far as the consumption of coffee is, for the most part, those wealthier stage 4 countries in Western Europe, Northern America, and parts of East Asia. So you can definitely see a clear difference between those that produce the coffee and those that consume the coffee. And so essentially the raw materials, the coffee beans, are gathered in Kenya, taken somewhere else, manufactured, and then sold, and oftentimes sold back. If Kenyans wanted to drink coffee, they would actually have to export coffee into their country in terms of the final manufactured product. And so that's one of the problems you see in a lot of these resource-cursed countries is oftentimes the raw materials or the resource they export out so that somewhere else it can be manufactured, value can be added, and then they have to then buy it back at a higher price, that raw material once it's converted to a finished product. And we see all countries of the world that have a Starbucks, and even though you can get your Kenyan blend of Kenyan coffee beans from Starbucks in your caramel latte frappuccino, you can't get one there pretty much anywhere in Africa. And subsequently, you don't see people benefiting from the growth of Kenyan coffee anywhere in Kenya. And so once again, misuse of funds, and you see it's all about protection of that key resources. So people all want to keep control of, in this case in Kenya, the coffee plantations. In other parts of the world, for example in Central America or maybe South America, drugs. So I don't need to go through all the various movies that showcase the drug trade and all the violence associated with it, but here's the coca leaves that are used for cocaine. There's no doubt that in a lot of those countries, the resource is a particular drug. And you see this also in Afghanistan. Poppies, which is key for heroin, is opiates. I'm not a drug expert, so forgive me. But what we got going on here is these drugs are very much key to fueling a lot of the conflict in these areas, because people want to control, because they can make a whole lot of money off of these particular resources. Probably the best example of the resource curse would be oil in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries of the world. So here we see, for example, an oil rig there in Iraq. And so way back when, this is kind of up in the Kurdistan area. And so Saddam Hussein is a great example, or maybe a bad example, of the resource curse. And so Iraq was, for the last 30 years, been one of the poorer countries. It's been chaos, lots of corruption, but lots of the focus has been either on protecting the oil industry or protecting Saddam. And so although you had one of the poorest countries in the world, you had all these palaces, all these very, very, very opulent mansions that Saddam lived in throughout much of various areas of the Iraq. And so what we have here is we have oil a particular resource in which all the eggs, all of the focus in the Iraq is on oil. And so whoever controls oil has the power. And so when we see a lot of the conflict that's occurring there historically, today, and in the future, it's all over oil. But the fear is, well, what happens when all of a sudden people don't need oil? What happens if oil runs out? So this is one of the things that we see as far as resource curse. All of their eggs are in the resource basket. So when we think about Saddam, was there corruption? Oh, you bet your bottom dollar there was. Was there conflict? Yeah. He went up to this area, this Kurdistan area, and pretty much gassed and put people in mass graves so he could gain access to resources. They were found more up in this particular area. So this is a very tragic example of the resource curse. But you're seeing this in other countries as well. So you're seeing this in Angola, another country with a lot of oil. You're seeing another mineral, Coltan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Coltan is a particular mineral, found in every single one of your smartphones for the most part. And so now that everyone in the world is using this particular device and this particular mineral, it's now very, very, very widely sought after. So because of that, people are fighting over control of that particular resource in that particular country. You have other examples. You have a guy named from a movie that was famous called Last King of Scotland. His name was Idi Amin. And so Forrest Whitaker played him in the movie. But that guy was the president of Uganda. So essentially what he did was he was very charismatic, came to leadership in that particular movie, in that particular country. It's based on a true story. And then over time, he got corrupt. Over time, he started having, spending all the money on big parties and Rolls Royces and big machine guns and all of this protection. But meanwhile, the country of Uganda was in chaos and was having people dying all throughout the country. Very, very simple things. And so over time, people got pissed off, and that led to the main plot of that movie. So all of these are examples of the resource curse. Another great example of the resource curse would be diamonds. And this is made famous by a guy named Kanye West. I don't know if you've heard of him, who wrote a song called Diamonds in Sierra Leone. And so it was all about the conflict minerals, as they're called, in which people are, it was a heavily conflicted area as people try to control or try to gain access to the various diamond mines in Sierra Leone. Here we see a diamond mine, probably one of the largest in Botswana, southern Africa. This is company called De Beers, in which they mine diamonds. And so one of the outcomes is, okay, you got all this area being mined. Now all the diamonds have been found. Now what do we do? Now we got a big old hole. And so once again, resource curse. You kind of see the environmental consequences of it as well. Of course, even in the United States, you do see the resource curse. You see in terms of coal mining, particular areas of the country, and so oftentimes you're seeing a lot of West Virginia coal towns, Pennsylvania, Eastern Kentucky coal towns, that now that when the coal runs out or when they clear an area of kind of all the creamy nougat of coal, all the good stuff, they move on. So you're seeing a lot of coal towns essentially just hollowed out. This is essentially people to move out. They're essentially ghost towns as the coal industry just kind of moves on to the next coal mine. Further, these are also places that have higher rates of lung cancers. So a lot of this has to do with the kind of the role or the kind of the job activities involved with coal mining. You inhale a lot of soot. You inhale a lot of air pollution. So subsequently, a lot of people have black lung disease, and so you see higher hospitalization rates. You see lower life expectancies. So all of this is kind of, once again, an example of the resource curse. I'm not saying that you're seeing, Saddam Hussein in action here, but nonetheless, this is another way to showcase this particular phenomenon. So now I go back to the Middle East, and they recognize they have the resource curse, and they recognize there's a problem. And so what they've done is they've tried to diversify their portfolio. They tried to add other types of things. And so here we see, in the case of Dubai, they actually built and created these islands and these homes and these vacation properties. Essentially, they created an island in the middle of their sea, in the middle of the ocean. So this is man-made, created stuff. It is essentially trying to look like a palm tree. But if you zoom in, if you look closely, you can see the size of these properties. These are massive. And so what they're doing is they're trying to showcase or add more to their local economy besides oil. So they're trying to build commercial properties. They're trying to lure banks and large multinational corporations. They're building big hotels. They're building indoor ski slopes. They're building racetracks. They're building all kinds of Ferrari dealerships, all kinds of things to try to lure people to come down to this particular area of the world and invest, so they add more to their economy than just over-relying on oil. And now they've created a very cosmopolitan, probably a good example of a future global or world city, and this is Dubai. This is in the Middle East. This is nothing what we would think 20, 30 years the Middle East would look like, but what they're doing is they're trying to diversify. They're trying to do more than just over-rely on that particular resource.